Hey everyone. Hi. Welcome. My name is Marilyn Shannon and this is the Breaking Free Show. And as always, I am so delighted to have you join us today. It's a beautiful week. It's Thanksgiving. I'm so thankful that I get the opportunity to come here each and every week to be with you and to have Amnon sitting right here.
Hello,
I'm so thankful for you, Amnon. I
and I'm
mean,
thanking for you.
but no,
I
really and
always look
truly,
forward to Monday when you come because every show that you do is so great.
thank you.
It's so full of. I always learn something from each and every show that you do.
Oh, you've never said that before. Well, I'm going to say something too that I've never said before.
Oh.
But no, seriously, we've been doing this together for 4.5 years,
Shall I
right?
leave? Shall I
Yeah,
keep
no,
on streaming?
keep it right there.
Okay.
4.5 years,
Wow.
and you get
Huh.
gifts along the way, and you acknowledge those gifts when you can, and you take opportunities, and those are our gifts. And 5, 6 years ago, Amnon said, "Would you like to do a show?" And I said yes. I never even gave it any thought, and I mean, this has got to be a gift made in heaven because how many people have an opportunity to do this each and every week? So I want to thank you for the insight that you have to have put all this together so that we can continue to bring together the greatest shows that any show like this could ever bring, you
Ah,
know?
you're
So
welcome.
so thank
Thank
you
you again.
for always being here and doing this with me. So thank you. Because today's show is so fascinating, and I said something to Chris. I said something to Chris, who works with me, because Chris found our guest today, and I said, and I don't think I've ever said this to her either. I said, Chris, good one. This is a good one. Because this is something that you don't always think about, and maybe you don't know to think about these things. And that's the thing about the show. We will bring you things that maybe you didn't think about, didn't even know to ask about. But when we bring this to you, what we're doing here is we're offering each other choices so that we are better educated and that our life, my life, your life, is in the proper hands. I want my life, the people that I love, in my heart, in my hands. I want to know what I can do. And so today's show is going to be great. We've had the request to talk about seniors getting older, geriatrics. We've had that request from our listeners. And to be perfectly honest with you, many of you know because I've had my mother here. She's 90 and I'm 61 years old. I'm, growing up. So we have a really exciting show on, and I want to welcome Dr. Dennis Mccullough to our show today. He's been a family physician and geriatrician for 30 years. His wife's a poet. He's fabulous, and he's written this book called My Mother, Your Mother, which is true, right? And it's all about slow medicine. And what does that mean? And when you think about slow medicine, you are coming from your heart of hearts. And so let me welcome to our show today Dr. McCullough. Welcome, Dr. McCullough.
Well, thank you, Marilyn. It's great to be here when you're celebrating your relationship with your staff, too. You want to keep them together and have them on your team when the going gets rough. Everybody
Yes,
needs a group like that to help them through.
absolutely. We are, and it's interesting. I'm writing a blog about networking and creating a network of people because we're so fortunate today. I mean, we can look at all the darkness that's going on in the world, and there's plenty of that, but there's plenty of light too. There's plenty of genius all around us. And when we create this network, when we reach out and we create these groups of people that we can refer to, that we can ask questions to, that we can learn from, we are taking our power back, and we are not allowing people to do things for us unbeknownst to ourselves that is not always in our best interest. So,
You're right. And all of those friends who we gather around us and others help us to sometimes see the blind spots that we can't see on our own. It's
exactly.
great to have a team.
It
It's
is.
wonderful to have a team.
It is. And now you're part of our team.
Hey, thank you.
We're part of
Yeah,
each other's
there are
team.
a term that you can talk about having a whole community-wide team, but also everybody needs a personal team.
That's right.
And the term that I've used is circle of concern. But when I was speaking in Asia this year, I found out that they talk about it as building horizontal families. Isn't that a great idea?
Well, I want to write that down. Horizontal families.
Horizontal families.
I
And
love that.
isn't it wonderful? So the vertical family is the kind of the family that may have a lot of little offshoots with marriages and remarriages and half brothers and sisters, etc. But it's sort of biological and in a more traditional way. But horizontal families are all those people who know you maybe even better than your family does when you're older. And they're the people who can kind of shed light for you when the darkness seems to start to unfold.
Exactly. Wow, that's horizontal family. That's beautiful. So, I just want to remind everybody that you're tuning in here that you are more than welcome to chat with us. If you put your name next, underneath the video that you're watching, you can take part in the chat and ask questions in there. Just comment. You can call us at 919-518-9773. You can Skype in if you like. Computers 2K voice. We'd love to have you in any way, shape, or form that you would like to come in. So, Dr. McCullough, what is this idea about slow medicine?
Slow medicine is a philosophy of approaching your own aging in relation to all the little things that will happen along the way. How you begin to change physically and the consequences of that, the issues around driving and where you live and sort of work or not work into the future. And also predominantly, because a lot of my experience, of course, has been around healthcare and medicine, how you relate to care of all kinds, including medical care and healthcare as you get older. So the philosophy is that there is a better way of doing this. And the part of the slow medicine is the practices of it. And the practices emphasize taking time, pacing things differently, understanding that whole, having somebody understand your whole vertical and horizontal family. Basically, it's arguing for a better process for looking at your life and making decisions as you grow older.
So
that's a start.
So it's not just about the medication you take, but it's your entire lifestyle.
It is. A lot of it, if the starting point for many folks is rebuilding the horizontal, rebuilding the vertical family. Because in many instances, and you're not in that case because you were talking about your mom and sort of how connected you are with her and your aunt and brothers and sisters. And so you're all connected. But for many people, there's been a drifting apart as they've gotten older. Families have separated geographically. Families have separated emotionally. A lot of other things have come up. And people's lives have gotten so busy that as long as everything is going along okay, people don't pay a lot of attention to the need to know more about one another. And in a sense, this is where the horizontal family comes in, that the vertical family can learn a lot from the horizontal family if they pay attention to that. That is to say, you can learn a lot from your mom's friends, what happens in her life day to day, by talking with people who spend time with her. So it's not just the little interchange you have with her occasionally or a lot, maybe even daily, but it's also about seeing how other people see her and how she's doing and what issues may be coming up.
So is it to see how she's doing, what issues that I may not be paying attention to or realize, or is it to be able to share in a greater piece of my mother?
I think it's both. That there are things that parents are always parents, and they're at some point there's a reflex to protect your children from things that you don't want to bother them with, or maybe you don't want them to know in detail. And so there's a little bit of that goes on. And just as we don't let our parents, as they get older, share all of our worries, for instance, and all of our concerns and the things going on, there's always that sort of slow the diffusion of information within family relationships. Whereas with our friends, we may actually share more with them in the beginning because we trust them a little more.
Mm-hmm. Right. So family is family, right? Regardless of
Family is
whether
family.
it's the vertical or the horizontal. And if somebody, just summing up, if you are somebody who, let's say, are disconnected from your family, in going forward, regardless of the age, we're aging later, we're
Yeah.
aging longer,
Yes.
to develop these relationships so that the quality of your life and the quality of your horizontal family's life or the quality of your vertical family's life is is fuller and richer because
It
we
it
right.
it is fuller and richer. And there's an interesting thing. If you look at the dynamics of families along the way from the very beginnings of, let's say, your family of origin, and then you marry and you have children, etc. If you look at the kind of the family life cycle over time, family sociologists will say there are two times when there's a lot of conflict and difficulty. One is adolescence, where we all come to understand that that's a time of sort of balancing, supporting your children and keeping the reins on at the same time. They're trying to become more independent. You're trying to help them be independent, but you differ in your judgments about how best to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the second time where a lot of conflict comes up, and this is probably more the case in families that have been a little more separated from one another, families almost invariably have to get together more and more intimately as the parents grow older. For instance, the medical care system expects families to step in and do things, and it's amazing how families are unprepared.
So okay, so let's start with specifically, you are a daughter or a son. It's your father, your mother. They're aging. They're let's start. Well, like with what I did today, for instance, this morning, because of knowing that Dr. McCullough was coming on, and I hadn't done this before, because many of you know my mother, and she's quite spirited. She's been on the show before. She's 90. She's a twin, but she certainly doesn't look her age, and she's amazing. But this morning, because I'm learning, I spoke to my mother and I said, by the way, I don't want to talk to her about, well, you're 90, but when as things progress, what do you want? I've never had that conversation with her. Like, how do you want to, be taken care of? And she said, well, I have a living will, and I didn't even know that. My brother has it, and I trust my brother to the max, but I didn't know she had one. So that made me feel better. And then I asked her, if when the time comes, if she's not feeling well and she's on machines or whatever, she said, I don't want to be on machines. Well, I didn't know that either.
Aha.
That was
So
amazing.
yeah, it's amazing. And the Medicare system since the late 1980s has been encouraging every older person to have advanced directive discussions. But the percentage of people who have actually done that, have developed a living will or a durable power of attorney for healthcare, designating who should
Mm-hmm.
help them make decisions if they're not able to. A very small percentage, something like 25% of people only
Mm-hmm.
have undertaken that. So, and here's your mom, 90 years old. She's been on Medicare for 35 years, 25 years, and she's done this, but she hasn't shared it in a way that will make you a little bit more knowledgeable if a crisis comes along, or maybe when a crisis comes along, which is quite commonly the way it happens.
But I guess I'm confused by the terminology.
Okay.
Slow medicine. What does
Yeah.
that mean exactly?
Slow medicine means that there is broader sharing of information as you get older, so that people understand how you are evolving in your thinking and wishes.
Mm-hmm.
and then having a process to slow down and have more in-depth discussions about how to get what an older person might want for their future as they grow older. And a lot of people might want, for instance, much more intensive approach to their medical problems if they get acutely ill. Other people do not want to be on machines, like your mom is saying. Mm-hmm. Some people would rather move and live near their children. Others would rather stay in their home until the very end if they can, as up here in northern New England. Yeah, you know, take me out by my feet first. That's what's going to happen to me, Doc. So the idea of slow medicine is to recognize that older people need different attention paid to them beyond what doctors traditionally do in order to make good decisions about healthcare, medical care, housing, etc., as you get older.
So what do you say to the person who says, well, when it happens, we'll just take care of it, and we'll do whatever. They don't even care. My mother, my father, they don't really care. I'll just take care of it. They'll just whatever. They're getting old. Why does it matter?
You mean as an adult child to take that perspective?
Yeah.
To just sort of pick up the pieces?
Yeah.
It's very expensive, for one thing. People don't understand exactly, but a large portion of expenses related to an aging parent who is getting frail and needing more support does not come from Medicare or Medicaid. It comes out of the family pockets. And so if you're not on top of that, you may find yourself suddenly looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of care that you haven't planned for or thought about. Mm-hmm. So one of them is financial. The other one is, I think, emotional. That maybe some people can just hold back and say, well, I'll just let it fall apart. They can have their way. I'll go in, it'll be over, and I'll move on with my life. But my experience is that when your parents become ill or when they're dying, it's amazing what's activated in terms of your own feelings about what's happening. It's the classic prodigal son kind of story. Somebody who has been disengaged as an adult child, who comes roaring back into the situation. And doctors see this all the time with very, very strong opinions because they've been so out of the loop, out of touch with what's happening in their parents, with their parents and their family. And all the sibling rivalries come back again too.
Yes.
So you're asking for trouble, really, if you don't try to do some reconvening and remending as a family over time. You don't have to do it, but you may pay a price.
Okay, so that's all so interesting, because it really is taking care of everybody. Because it's the inevitable. I mean, people are going to get older, so it's taking care of everything. It's having a quality of life while you can thrive and you live, because everybody knows where we're going with this for the most part. Yes. And then when you get there, you're more prepared to handle situations that arise because you know.
And your parents have also, and your family has modeled behavior for you. So your children are watching you saying, I wonder, this is something I'm going to have to do someday. How are my mom and dad carrying this out with their own parents? There's a lot of family modeling that goes on, given this extended period of life that we're seeing more and more now. People are living longer and longer. And when you live longer and longer, although your mom may be the exception, many people have much more complicated lives with more medications, more degrees of disability, mental and cognitive problems that come with age. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing a more complex person now in American life and around the world. This longevity thing, along with the extensive medical approaches that can be brought and technologies to both keep people going, but also sometimes to really subject them to the kind of care that is actually painful and difficult. So this is a different era, and we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we have to do things somewhat differently now. And the medical care system, which is going along at 100 miles an hour with 15-minute visits.
Right.
And if you have Alzheimer's or another chronic disease, maybe you don't even have to come into my office anymore, because we'll just wait until you have a big problem and then we'll figure out what to do. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot changing in the healthcare system now, and it's not necessarily for the better. Slow medicine is meant to offset some of that, so that fast medicine works well for you when it's the appropriate thing to do. But there's an alternative that has to be thought about more deeply almost at every step along the way as you get older.
So why do you think that there's a trend that families are less prepared to step in? Is it because of all the technology and all the things that are going on, or is it something deeper?
Having talked with people around the world, I think that we are probably a more youth-obsessed society than the average. Mm-hmm. And so this whole idea of aging is sort of how to not have it happen to you, as opposed to how to recognize that it's inevitable and to some degree embrace it, because there are certain kinds of maturation that happen more when you realize that you have these limitations. I mean, people talk about cognitive frailty and physical frailty, but you don't hear so much talk about emotional and spiritual frailty. And so these are areas of strength and growth that happen for a lot of folks. And it'd be interesting for you, Marilyn, to have a chat with your mom mm-hmm. about this. What strengths has she developed as she's gotten older, and how did she develop those?
So, it's so interesting, because I'm having so many thoughts in this moment about first of all, when you mentioned embracing, that's a key word here, is embracing the relationship that we're in, and help and just embracing it to be better, to be deeper. My mother's 90. So talking to her friends, which I do, seeing her in action, which I have, but really taking it in more into my heart, as really knowing my mother in a bigger, better way is yes. fabulous. And then just this whole idea of taking it, doing that, and then having it evolve, and the spirituality part, yeah. having bigger, better conversations about things.
Yes.
And when you eliminate the worry, the financial worry, the worry of certain things when they're out on the table, you can allow yourself to go deeper into the things that matter most, when you're not concerned about what's this going to cost, or is this what they want, or what am I going to do? They don't feel well. And the focus changes.
It does. And if you're in this together and your family is together, can you imagine how much easier it is to live a day for that day when you're not worrying about all of these things, that you felt that you're really on net, as they say, with your family, mm-hmm. that your family's sort of behind you and understands you and they're ready to step in. If all of those things are in place, sometimes we assume they're in place, but it turns out when you come into the middle of a crisis, that there are disagreements about things, that between siblings, for instance, or between children and parents, that nobody anticipated was going to come up.
Mm-hmm. And the other, I know you mentioned it, and I've seen it for myself, watching my father and grandparents in the past, when they've been over-medicated.
Yeah.
Which is awful. That's
awful. It is awful. And the number of medications, if you look at them, that an older person is taking over the past 15 or 20 years, has been just going up and up and up. I mean, the number of people who are on 12, 15 or more medications. And one of the simple things about medications is that, well, a couple of things. One is, if you take enough medications, you can shut down your brain and your appetite. Two things which are fairly important in going forward in a healthy way. I mean, all those things take a little bit of out of your appetite when you're on a lot of medications. Try swallowing as many medications as some older people, and you might find yourself unable to do your show on a Monday. The second is that medications are not targeted specifically to a particular problem or organ the way they're advertised, like this will help your bladder or this is going to help your arthritis pain. But they actually go everywhere in your body, and they go, for older people, to a very fragile brain. And so the kinds of things that can take the edge off someone's ability to sort of think oftentimes can be found, and geriatricians will all tell you this, in the medications that people are taking. And even if you could tolerate medications at age 80, because of the physical aging of the body, you're oftentimes less able to tolerate them when you get to be 90. So something which was just working fine can turn out to be a culprit medication.
So part of this notion or the philosophy of slow medicine, because we've had a show about slow money
Yes,
before.
slow money is good too.
Is to really pay attention to what's going on, right?
Right.
What else? Because some people have to take medicine.
Some people have to take medicine, but the need for taking as much medicine over time has really been debated back and forth. That things get loaded on, and they get loaded on by one of the, on the average, 6 doctors that an older person in their 80s might have, all prescribing different medications, and nobody having the discussion to reconcile which ones may be more important than another. Every doctor feels their medications are more important than anybody else's. So it's very hard to get those kinds of compromises that you need to have. So the whole issue with medications is a huge one. I was working, had been working, as I mentioned to you earlier, before the show started, on a community nursing project where we have nurses going into people's homes to sort of sit in their kitchen table and get to know them, talk to them, take a look at all the medications. One of the big areas of difficulty that comes up is the discovery of how many medications people have in their house, because when you're older, you never throw away your old medications. You might need them sometime. So that there are half-open things, and there are tables next to beds with medicines sort of scrambled in together, and people know the colors, but they don't know the names. And they say, I think this is for my heart, or this may be for my arthritis, but there's a lot of confusion about this.
One
of the biggest problems is really sorting out the medications, which doesn't get done in doctors' offices, but we're finding that it can get done at the kitchen table.
Mm-hmm. You know, some of this stuff I sit back and I think, well, as a daughter, like I know that I've sat with my mother before when she has her medicine in in the days of the week, or she has them in a certain system, and she knows the color, then she goes to Costco and they change the color, and then it's all messed up.
Yeah.
So my thought is that some of the stuff we're talking about, I'm already doing. We're already on top of. Either I am, I have a brother that's an accountant, I have a brother that's a doctor. So between the three of us, we've got it going on. Yeah. What's not happening in other families? I mean, I'm taking it for granted a lot of these things are happening, but what's not happening?
Families are not showing up to spend time with parents. They're time that really allows you to understand what's going on. One of the issues or suggestions that I talk about again in this guidebook is the 72-hour visit. Ask an adult child to come and spend time with an older parent, let's say in their 80s, because we're really looking at mostly the group over 80 or prematurely over 80 and talking about slow medicine for elders. and to spend 72 hours, but during the 72 hours, turn off your cell phone, don't take your iPad, get rid of all your technologies, and don't make any appointments to just hang out with your friends who happen to be nearby that you'd like to have dinner with or go off with. 72 straight hours, just living your parents' life and observing, talking with them the way you have with your parents' friends, as a way of really understanding the sort of the texture of their days, because that becomes a very sensitive indicator of when there are changes happening. And so if you don't know the baseline of the texture of their days by spending an extended time with them, it's very hard to know what's changing and what's not. Mm-hmm. When I mention this to people, they just pull back and they say, 72 hours? You know, I don't know if I could do that, but I think that that's the kind of thing that really gets into the areas that you're wondering that you may be missing, Marilyn.
I see. Now okay, so this picture is getting bigger for me now. And
okay.
You know what I think it's really it's relevant to understand this magnitude of slow medicine is not just popping a pill. It's an entire philosophy.
It is a philosophy,
right, of aging.
It is. And if the other word that's, I think, important in terms of the philosophy is skepticism. Mm-hmm. Because the things that may have been extremely helpful at 70, at 90 may not. Now they may, but to enter into approaching every problem with a little bit of skepticism about whether you want to jump into something until you really understand the range of alternatives. I mean, this could be, for instance, someone, a surgeon saying, well, I just operated on somebody who was 90 years old last week and they're doing just fine. Well, that's one 90-year-old. That's not necessarily your mom or dad mm-hmm. at 90. And similarly, I'm kind of lost my train of thought there for a minute. But the idea of, let's take pills for high blood pressure. There is a lot of difference between what is generally being thought about and done in European countries where they study older people also extensively in relation to the aggressiveness of treating high blood pressure. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not advocating for coming off high blood pressure medications entirely, but I'm just saying that there's a different balance that goes on mm-hmm. because these medications may be dropping blood pressures down to a lower level that then put someone at risk for falling. All it takes is a sort of a big lunch, a fair number of blood pressure medications, a half glass of wine, and standing up in a restaurant right. when you're in your 80s or 90s. That's enough to potentially get you into trouble very suddenly.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So this is really fascinating because, again, the skepticism, and not even wanting to face these things. But I think it's very important as I grow older is to set up my team, that my family, my vertical, horizontal family, of what's interesting to me and, speak about these things so they know how I feel and, what my feelings are about taking medicine, for instance.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also to begin to gauge your own children mm-hmm. in terms of how they're responding to your even wanting to talk about this. Because if they don't want to talk about it, then you've got some work to do because over time, almost invariably, they're going to become concerned and engaged with your life. Almost invariably.
So, I have several questions, but the one I want to ask you the most is why, obviously the show is called Breaking Free.
Yeah.
It's about freedom. Why is this so freeing?
Why is this so
freeing? Why is this notion of slow medicine and this topic and everything we're talking about so freeing?
Freeing. Well, it's freeing because I think it allows us to examine our views about aging and this whole idea of embracing aging is a positive thing, and to recognize that strengths come from that. The second thing is that when you begin to share more intimately the concerns that you have as you age, then that is giving you social and emotional support in and of itself, which is an excellent prognosticator of how you're going to do with your health over time.
Right. So it adds time to your beautiful life.
It does. A very specific example, we have a new head of palliative care here at Dartmouth, and he's been doing research. He's Australian, actually, and does research around the world. And he's showing very clearly in palliative care that if you make good, thoughtful decisions that you reflect on for a longer period of time and that are sort of reflective of your values when you're having your cancer treated along the way, and you know when to get off the treatment wagon, you're likely to live longer and have better quality of life than if you keep pushing forward with the third and fourth and whatever generation medications and what's called sometimes salvage chemotherapy. But what's being offered to people is always another thing, feeling that we're giving them, quote, hope. And this is an extremely tricky area because we want people to have hope, but we have to discuss in more detail hope for what.
You spoke about in some of your literature about taking a medicine vacation.
Yes. Let me give you an example of this. My mom, when she was about 88, she spent a lot of time with us. She lived with us for 2 to 3 months every year. We'd take her in, and she liked to have a long stretch, and it was wonderful for us. But as she got in her late 80s, we noticed that she was, she'd always take a little nap after lunch, but suddenly the naps were gradually. The naps were, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours. And we thought, oh my goodness, she's just sort of tiring out, she's getting older, etc. But then when we started, my wife and I and my mom and her doctor started looking at things, we said, look, she's been on this medication, a beta blocker for her blood pressure reduction and control for many years. And she'd been doing just fine on it, like 15 years on this. But we said, well, beta blockers are sedating. I wonder if something is changing, and now she's more sensitive to it. So we talked about cutting out the medication for a while, monitoring her blood pressure to see, and usually it doesn't change dramatically when you make a change like that, but you have to monitor it. And lo and behold, her naps now went down to 15 to 30 minutes a day because she was sedating herself with a drug that hadn't been recognized as happening because it came on so gradually. So there are many things like this that catch up with older people who have been on drugs for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my father was in, and I don't like these places. He was in a rehab because he had fallen on his 92nd birthday. So he was in a rehab, and after surgery, blah, blah, blah. And somebody asked to look at his chart of the medicines that he was taking. They thought currently. And so they brought out the list of medicines. Well, these were his history, not what he was taking currently. And had we not been there to say, whoa,
right,
you're misunderstanding each other. It's not, these are not what he's taking currently. This is what he has taken throughout his whatever. That was man, that was like scary. And I always sat back and thought, what about the people who don't have people?
I know. And here's another scary thing, Marilyn, if you want scary things. The electronic health record, which was introduced with the best of intentions to make clinical care better, by getting information systematically that was legible, et cetera, into a patient's chart, and then it became a sort of a financial tool for making sure that all the motions were gone through in order to bill at a particular level for visits and procedures and things like that. Many clinicians now find that the electronic health record so overwhelms them with medication, with information, that they cannot find the essence of what the issues are in that vast, vast electronic file that they're faced with. So that these kinds of mistakes about knowing really what's going on, or knowing when somebody had a bad reaction to a medication in the past, it's simply harder to find this stuff now. So it used to be that you would have a quick telephone discussion with another doctor, for instance, in consultation, and say, now here's the essence of the problem as I see it. Can we talk about this, and then see the patient, and we can talk again about your perspective on it or your view. But now we're doing all this stuff electronically, transferring information, and these reams of information arrive on a doctor's desk before a consultation, and the doctor cannot figure out how to find in that file what's useful.
I know. So now, I know that all too well.
Okay.
Yeah. So now, we have a couple of things that I would love for you to tell us what we do with it. So for each of us, it's great to set up this network. You know, our friends, our family, our children, and how we want things to go.
Yes.
It's a lot of work taking care of a senior. You know, when my father was in the rehab, my mother, my brothers, we were all involved. Mm-hmm. Is there, you know, I hear from people all the time, you know, they're exhausted. What do you tell people that are like me, taking care of, you know, seniors that we don't have the setup network, or even when they do, they're in beautiful assisted livings, they have somebody coming to their house, but it's exhausting. What do you tell us? Yeah.
Well, what I talk about is the work of somebody who I admire a lot, whose name is Arthur Kleinman, who's a professor of psychiatry and a professor of medical anthropology at Harvard. In his mid-70s, and he cared for his wife who had dementia for a number of years before she passed away several years ago. And so he's experienced caregiving, he's written about it, and he understands both from a psychiatric point of view and a medical anthropological point of view, the history of and the experiences across cultures of caregiving. Okay? Because caregiving is universal. Mm-hmm. It is universal. And Kleinman has written, and this may or may not feel comforting immediately to somebody who's in the middle of caregiving, and I know how difficult it is. It's very, very difficult. He says that caregiving is, in essence, a stage of human life which helps with maturation when we're adults. We learn something about human life which is deeper and more profound and more important than if we don't have the, quote, opportunity to do caregiving. Now, talking about caregiving as an opportunity to somebody who is exhausted is very hard. On the other hand, if you talk to people who have been through the caregiving journey, many, many people will tell you that it's one of the best things, if not the best thing they've done in their life in relation to their family and their relationships. Mm-hmm. So this is a conundrum in a way, because it is difficult, but there is an end to it, and it will put you in a different place if you can maintain your health through that, which is why you need that vertical and horizontal family, because nobody can go the caregiving journey on their own. It's too complicated, too difficult. Historically and across cultures, it's not done that way.
Well, this is the best part of the whole. Honestly, what you've just said is so important. I thank you so much for delivering it in the most beautiful way you just did.
You're welcome. And we'll thank Dr. Kleinman because his insights and his writing have really helped me a lot in terms of trying to communicate to people who are in the middle of difficulty how this may look over time. But some people lose their health with caregiving, and it's almost invariably because they have felt that they needed to do it all by themselves. And I can understand why somebody wants to do it by themselves, because when you're a caregiver, you get to know the person you're caring for and what their needs are and how to handle those better than anyone. And so you're hesitant to turn over that responsibility to someone else. And particularly to people think about nursing homes or assisted living, and they say, how is someone going to know exactly about the details of days that go well and how they get put together for my mom or dad or spouse? Mm-hmm. So I can see why people want to hold on to that, but that's a danger.
Yeah, and I've seen, when my father was in hospice, I saw my father in ways I had never seen him before. He was, I mean, thank God he wasn't angry. He was loving. It was like just, and I spent every moment I could with him. But I think, and with what you're saying, I really feel like people have to ask for help.
Yes.
Caregivers have to ask for help. You have to bring in children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and share this life.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
The last edition of AARP magazine, for instance, focused on caregiving and pointed out that at any given time, 40 million households in the US, and that's 40 million probably out of 120 or 130 million total households, are involved in caregiving at any one time. So and we know that with elder caregiving, it's sort of a stage that if you're not doing it yet, you're probably going to have to engage it at some time if your parents are still going on and getting older. So that number is very, very high. The percentage of families that deal with caregiving issues over a lifetime is very, very high, probably 50, 60, maybe 70% of families.
And it is, I know I have this friend up here whose mother and aunt in North Carolina, she moved them up here because they were very, elderly and didn't know where they were some of the time. It's important to move, I believe, a senior before you can't move them anymore. There's a time when, like, I have an aunt and uncle in Florida, can't be moved, and their children all are in New York, cannot be moved. It's too much. They can't.
Yeah.
They're too old. Cannot be moved. I think that's very important. Is that our parents sometimes don't want to move, but they have to be moved before they can't be moved.
Yes, as long as the process, and this is the slow part, the pacing part of it, happens over a long enough period of time so there's an adaptation to an idea that wasn't particularly attractive to begin with.
Right.
And so it's like driving, giving up driving. It should be approached as a slow, steady, well, I'll give up this much of driving. I won't go on interstates anymore, or I won't go to the mall because it's too dangerous in those parking lots. But to not have curtail driving all at once, it's a paced process.
Sure.
And so this adaptation, older people adapt to this stuff.
Right.
They do. If you give them a chance and treat people with respect and are very, very patient, that almost invariably people will adapt. I mean, older people who are older at some point come to understand that they can't live the life that they've had before. But you got to stick with it until you get to the point where you come into a compromised arrangement, let's say around moving.
Hmm. Well, aging doesn't happen over. I mean, it's not overnight. I mean, I'm aging. I cannot do. I mean,
Right.
my insides tell me I'm 19,
Yeah.
but I can't do the same thing I always did. I mean, so it's a gradual process.
It is.
And I love what you're saying because, I'm faced with it. And I have a lot of friends that are faced with these things. And this is something that, to have a good quality of life for everyone, we have to pay attention to these things. And you're right, pace it. You don't stop something uh,
No. No.
quick. I mean, if I took the car away from my mother, she's perfectly fine at driving. But if I said to her, you can't drive, it would be awful.
Yeah.
She knows she can't drive at night. She
Yes.
knows that there's certain restrictions because she feels it. So we have to
Hmm.
empower, our seniors when they can be empowered to make those kinds of decisions and to support them along the way. And yeah, we need to create these loving family teams
Yes.
so that we can support each other
Yeah.
along the way.
And there's a part of the family that sometimes gets neglected, and that's the grandchildren.
Hmm.
Because oftentimes there's a more harmonious relationship between grandparents and grandchildren than there is between the parents and the adult children and the adult children and the
Right.
not
It's all
yet growing
love.
up children.
Yes. Yeah.
But because
Yeah.
grandchildren are they're watching all the time, right?
Right.
And they're saying, "Look, mom, you've had trouble handling this for so long. Maybe you can change the approach you're taking now because I've been watching you and grandma here facing off for all this time." And so grandchildren sometimes are really wonderful catalysts within families and should be included in family discussions and family process. That's how they get better at it too. That's how they're going to be there for you.
I'll tell you, you are so right. Because when my father was in the hospital and they tried, and he was, I mean, he was alert, and his heart was failing, and the doctor said, "I don't know what else we can do." It's my daughters, and my nieces that turned up and said, "I think it's time we brought Grandpa home," and we called in hospice. And they were
Wow.
the ones that
Yep.
could be that reasonable voice,
Yes.
and they knew, and it was them that said it.
Yeah.
And I really sitting here now, and I'm reflecting back, and I'm saying, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You're
And for
absolutely right.
those of us who are our age, Marilyn, in a sense, it's a bigger hole in our heart when our parents die
Yes.
because grandchildren see this as a more natural thing. But for those of us, we intellectually we see it as natural that our parents should die. But when it comes time for
Mhm.
that to be happening, it is very difficult. It's somewhere deep inside you realize that part of you is leaving.
Yeah, and it's not, and we're talking about, our parents, but we're also talking about our older brothers, our older sisters. I mean, we're talking about all of us.
Yes.
This is a conversation, a
Yeah.
beautiful conversation about all of us, you
It
know.
it is, and so I feel very committed to keeping on pushing this idea forward that we got a very good medical care system, for instance, in many ways, but we're not using it in the right way with the right kind of processes for older people. That's my take on
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
Uh, and having seen wonderful, wonderful quality of life right to the very end, including dying, I am optimistic that in many instances, if we make better decisions along the way, that those final
Hmm.
months to years or days will be better.
Yeah, and I in piggybacking on what Dr. McCullough is saying, if you don't like your doctor or you don't like the doctor of your parents, you have a right to make changes. That's very important that we're all on a team together, and that if you don't like the care or the answers that you're getting,
Mhm.
I mean, Dr. McCullough, tell me, right or wrong, tell us. What do you think? You could change your
Well,
doctor, right?
you can certainly change a doctor, but before jumping into that, Marilyn, doctors are usually a part of teams,
Okay.
and these days, and which is very good. And sometimes you can get insights into what's happening by asking to have conversation with the nurses
Okay.
who are working with that doctor or a social worker on the team, so that you can understand the doctor's perspective a little bit more and see if there are things that you become more sympathetic to so that it becomes a two-way supportive relationship. I think we all realize that the best relationships with doctors are partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
And they're partnerships between older people, the doctor, and families. And the third part of that sometimes gets left out until crises or the very end. And the sooner it's engaged, and you can bridge the three, the better.
Beautifully. Beautiful. I love that. That you're absolutely right. We have to communicate. We have
Yeah.
to communicate to those doctors, ask questions, look at files. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you got to do
Yeah.
that, and it's got
Yeah.
to be done.
Yeah. And to
Yeah.
their credit, Marilyn, I
Yeah.
would say that, you know, doctors take their problems from their work home. And oftentimes, when they've had more than the 15 minutes to engage it mentally, and they've got these things boiling on the back burner, if you will, at a slower pace, they begin to see that there may be some different alternatives than those that they move toward right away.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get a physician to be reflective and give both you and your parents and the doctor some time to say, let's just sit back for a while and all of us reflect a little more on what the options might be and how we want to go forward with this, rather than feeling that you're pushed into making a decision too prematurely or pushing the doctor into making a decision or recommendation prematurely.
Hence, slow medicine.
Hence, slow medicine.
So we're almost out of time. So tell our audience um, if there's anything like where they can buy your book.
You can buy my book on Amazon or have your local bookstore order it. It's a guidebook. It addresses things that you can do constructively from where Marilyn and I are at our point in aging, all the way through to the very point where Marilyn's mom is at this point in her 90s. And I have a new website called Slow Medicine for Elders that I hope to bring more information to along the way. The idea of slow medicine is catching on more. There's a great big movement in Italy now that talks about respect and equal treatment and sustainability. And the sustainability thing, Marilyn, we didn't talk about, but
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, this kind of work in slow medicine will help the medical system to survive the onslaught of many, many older people. If we don't make better decisions about it, we are going to be bankrupt as a country as well.
So there's this commentary about slow medicine throughout our lives, but you, Dr. McCullough, are focusing on geriatrics, right?
Yes.
Exactly. So this is
But
again.
many people have told me that, look, this, what you're talking about really suits me in looking after my child with disability, or my daughter who's 30 with a disability or mental illness, or whatever, wherever there's complexity,
Mm-hmm.
slow medicine has value.
Absolutely.
Wherever
Absolutely.
there's complexity.
Absolutely. So it's slowing down. It's slowing it down. Not just checking in. It's
Mhm.
creating this network. It's asking questions. It's looking at
Yeah.
alternatives.
Yeah.
It's reading Dr. McCullough's book. Okay. And looking
That's
at his
it.
and I will be examining your website because I know that there are things that we did not touch upon that
Yeah.
I know is important, and I would suggest that you all do the same thing. So, Dr. McCullough, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart because this is so meaningful to me, and that you were here today and sharing as you did, because this is and you do it so beautifully. You are the perfect messenger for delivering this information.
Thank you. It's been great to be with you.
Thank you so much. And Amnon, thank you. And everyone out there, thanks for being here and sharing this day with us. And I look forward to having you all back again next week after Thanksgiving. What kind of stories are we going to tell? Anyway, with that, have a wonderful week and take care of yourself and be safe. Mwah.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Health In with Debbie Brooke, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, The Tanya Love Show, Your Healthy Pet with Gisela DiCarlo. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by Atomus.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters for professionals, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.